The invisible girl and former Sunnydale resident Marcie Ross is on mission to assassinate Faith, and she likes her job. Faith has to defend herself against her. Carter is on her way back to the SGC, unaware of the danger coming for her daughter. Hey everyone, this is TA Stories 80, where we narrate fanfiction audiobooks. Now we begin Chapter 9 of Born into Darkness. Let's dive in. Outside Cheyenne Mountain, 14:30 hours. Marcie and her driver had been on I-25 for a little over an hour and a half before they reached the outskirts of Colorado Springs. From the corner of his eye, the driver noticed something strange. A phone appeared out of thin air, hovering just above the passenger seat. It dialed a number by itself, and then lifted to what he assumed was Marcie's ear. "Manetti, Agent Ross? What are the details on this base?" Marcie asked as she noticed the driver glancing at her before returning his attention to the winding mountain road ahead. He kept driving until they passed the entrance to Cheyenne Mountain. 5 minutes later, once they were out of sight of the guards, he pulled over to the side of the road. Marcie placed a hand on his arm while still speaking into the phone. Manetti explained that she needed to take an elevator 10 levels down and then transfer to another secured elevator to reach her destination. According to their contact, Faith was injured and likely confined to the infirmary on the 21st floor. "Neat," Marcie said brightly, her tone oddly cheerful. Her hand slid down the driver's arm until it rested on his thigh. She gave it a firm squeeze, still speaking with eerie calm. "How do I get into the secured elevators?" "This client has an insider at the Pentagon," Manetti replied. "They gave us all the details. Once you're past the guards, head to the parking lot and find a red car in the stall at the far left edge. The license plate number is..." After jotting down the number, Marcie ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket. She leaned close to the driver, tightening her grip on his thigh as she blew softly into his ear. "Ever been blown by an invisible girl?" she whispered before nipping his earlobe. No, ma'am," the driver stammered, staring straight ahead at the empty road. "Usually after a kill," Marcie murmured, her voice dropping to a husky whisper, "I get a little amorous." The driver didn't move a muscle, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Marcie's sudden burst of laughter made him flinch, but just as quickly as it started, it stopped. He felt her hand slide slowly upward from his thigh to his chest. "After this kill," she breathed, undoing the top 2 buttons of his shirt and placing her palm on his bare skin, "you'll know what it's like. 2 kills in 1 day. It's going to be euphoric, don't you think?" Yes, ma'am," he said weakly. Marcie grinned, a grin he couldn't see. She reached for the glove compartment, which opened on its own. 2 empty syringes and a small taser floated out before vanishing, tucked into her pockets. The door opened and closed again as she stepped out, her presence betrayed only by faint movement in the air. The driver heard her whistling as she walked away. He shuddered, started the car, and drove farther up the road, looping around until he was past the mountain entrance. 5 minutes later, he stopped, turned off the engine and muttered, "Fucking weirdo," under his breath. Meanwhile, Marcie walked briskly down the road, occasionally skipping like a carefree child. When she neared the guarded entrance to the mountain, she quieted her whistling. One of the guards was talking to an older man in a black truck. Marcie waited until the truck drove off before slipping unseen past the checkpoint and down the side entrance leading into the mountain itself. At the parking lot, she smiled to herself. Somewhere here was what she needed. She checked around and inside a red car, but found nothing. Then, crouching down, she spotted a white envelope taped beneath the chassis, hidden from view on the driver's side. Standing again, she crouched near the driver's door and reached under the car. Her fingers brushed the envelope's edge, and she tore it free. After making sure she was alone, she opened it and found 2 keycards inside. She tossed the empty envelope back under the car and examined the cards. One had the number 1 written on it in black marker. The other A 2. The first elevator, she thought. She slipped the card labeled 1 into her front pocket and the one marked 2 into her back pocket. Then she headed toward the glass doors at the far end of the lot. Beyond the doors, emblazoned with the NORAD logo, was a single elevator. Through the glass, she could see a guard at his desk, reading something. Marcie knocked softly on the glass door. The man looked up, frowning, then shook his head and went back to his reading. She knocked again. This time, he stood and walked toward the entrance. When he opened the doors to step outside, Marcie slipped quietly behind him and into the lobby. She pressed the elevator button just as he was turning to go back inside. The elevator dinged and the doors slid open. The guard frowned, stepping forward and peering inside the empty car. Marcie's hand was already on her taser in case he came closer. But then his desk phone rang. He turned and walked away to answer it. As soon as he was distracted, Marcie waited for the doors to close, then slid the first keycard into the slot on the right side of the control panel. She pressed the button for the 10th floor and smiled as the elevator began to move. When the doors opened again, she stepped into a long, empty hallway. Only one guard stood near another pair of elevator doors farther down. I guess I can't do any tricks on this floor, huh? She thought. Guess you gotta go down hard, guy. Before the guard could register the sound of footsteps, Marcie struck, her invisible hand hitting his throat with precision. He stumbled to his knees with a look of shock, gasping and clutching at his neck. Marcie stepped behind him, pulled out her taser, and pressed it against the back of his neck. He convulsed violently, then collapsed to the floor unconscious. Grinning, she pressed the elevator call button. The doors opened and she stepped inside. From her back pocket, she took the second keycard and slid it into the slot, then pressed the button for the 21st floor. Deep space telemetry, she mused as she watched the floor numbers change. Faith, I guess your ghost will be heading to space today. She paused, then laughed softly. Okay, that was a bad pun. I need better material. Oh, what the hell. Once she's gone, I'm out of here. Isolation Room 1, SGC. Faith lay on the bed as Dr. Fraser operated the mobile scanner, sweeping it over her body. Turning her head to the side, Faith glanced at the monitor the doctor was studying before looking back up at the ceiling. Her mind drifted to what General Hammond had told her earlier, that she would be protected and not handed over to the council. Diana told me about the military controlling slayers, Faith thought, staring blankly upward as the scanner made another slow pass. If the military wants to control me, does that make them any better than the council? I don't know what to do. I could try to escape if they decide to transfer me somewhere else, but escaping from here right now? No way, I'll probably get shot. She exhaled softly. Still, the baldy said he wasn't looking at me as a weapon like Wesley and the council do. He saw me, Faith, not just a slayer. That's confusing as hell. Okay, so the doc will probably find out I'm all healed up. Then they'll want to move me somewhere else for experiments. I'll escape then, just like I did when Wesley's team caught me back in Sunnydale. Then I'll get out of Colorado Springs and disappear. The scanner made its final sweep before powering down. Two nurses rolled it away as Dr. Fraser jotted something on her clipboard. Smiling, she stepped to Faith's bedside. Looks like your wounds have completely healed, Fraser said, leaning on the bed's railing. I'll be moving you to the infirmary for a few days of observation, just to be safe. I can leave after that? Faith asked. That's up to General Hammond, Fraser replied, pulling a chair close and sitting beside her. She adjusted the bed so Faith was nearly upright. Is there someplace you need to go? Faith didn't answer right away. The question hit her harder than she expected. Where could she even go? Once she was out of here, she'd still be a fugitive, wanted by the police for what happened to Alan Finch and Professor Worth. I'm sure Buffy told them something, she thought bitterly. But even then, I'll still have the council and these guys after me. Wherever I go, I'll have to keep looking over my shoulder. Hell, I'd rather have a pimp chasing me than deal with this crap. Faith? Dr. Fraser's voice brought her back. This healing you have, is it mystical in origin? General Hammond told me about who you are, so do you know if it's mystical or genetic? Faith frowned. You want to experiment on me? She asked coldly, glaring at the doctor. Fraser's expression turned horrified. No, she said quickly. What gave you that idea? Well, Faith muttered, Baldy knows I'm a slayer. So do you. I'm guessing you'd want to study me. That means taking me apart, right? Figure out what makes me tick? I mean, isn't that how you've got a demon working for you guys? Huh? Fraser blinked, thrown off. A demon? Working at the SGC? Faith went on, describing a dark-skinned, bald man, the same one she'd seen in her room after she was brought here. Fraser's confusion vanished. She means Tilk, she realized. You mean Murray? Fraser asked, then paused. Wait, how do you know he's a demon? Faith crossed her arms. Look, I just know, alright? It's a feeling. If you want to know how, maybe you should cut into my brain. All I'll say is, I'm not gonna make it easy. So you can sense Murray's demonness? Fraser asked cautiously, though in her mind she was already thinking, she can sense his symbiote. Yeah, Faith said flatly, I know he's a demon. So, if you're planning to do to me whatever you did to him, I can tell you now, I won't go quietly. No one is going to hurt you, Faith, Fraser said softly. That's something I can promise. We're curious about you, sure, but we're not going to cut you open. Faith studied her in silence, trying to decide if she was being honest. For the first time since she'd been brought here, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, these people actually meant what they said. I read people easy, Faith thought. After Diana died, reading people kept me alive, before and after Sunnydale. But this lady, and the Baldy, I don't know what to think. Then came the sound, a dull thud. Both women turned toward the closed glass doors. The metallic door slid open, revealing the body of the airman who'd been guarding it lying motionless on the floor. Airman! Fraser cried, rushing forward. Faith's instincts kicked in immediately. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the doctor kneel beside the fallen guard, only to suddenly double over as if she'd been punched in the gut. Fraser stumbled back, then slammed hard into the wall. Hey! Faith yelled, ripping out the leads attached to her chest, head, and wrist. She jumped off the bed, muscles coiled. Fraser groaned, collapsing to the floor. Then came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, from someone invisible. This is new, Faith thought grimly, eyes darting left just as something struck her across the face. She reeled backward, then ducked and vaulted over the railing to the other side of the bed. No one was there. Bam! Another hit slammed into her jaw, snapping her head to the side. Faith staggered back, teeth gritted, ears ringing. Then she heard the telltale rush of air, footsteps charging toward her. Something metallic floated in midair, lunging straight for her. A taser. Faith reacted on instinct. Slayer reflexes took over. She snatched the weapon midair, feeling a human hand gripping it from the other side, invisible fingers struggling against hers. Faith threw a sharp punch, holding back just enough not to kill. Her fist connected with the chest, and a grunt, distinctly female, echoed through the room. Didn't see that coming, huh? Faith snarled, punching again while still gripping the unseen wrist. But before she could land another blow, something invisible slammed into her face, hard. She stumbled sideways. Fraser, half-conscious, forced herself upright, bracing against the wall. Her eyes widened at the impossible sight. Faith fighting what looked like empty air. Heart racing, Fraser scrambled to a wall panel as Faith grunted, taking another hit. This is Dr. Fraser in Isolation 1, she shouted into the calm after slamming her hand on the red alarm button. The klaxons immediately blared through the facility. We have a code red. Security breach. I repeat, security breach. All security personnel to my location. Behind her came a heavy thud. She spun around just in time to see Faith convulse as the invisible attacker finally drove the taser into her side. Faith screamed, body jerking violently from the electrical current. Thinking fast, Fraser rushed to the nearby fire extinguisher. Fighting an invisible opponent was nearly impossible. But make them invisible, and the odds changed. She yanked the pin, aimed, and squeezed the lever. A thick spray of white foam erupted, coating the air around Faith. A second later came a loud panicked female scream that wasn't Faith's. "You blinded me!" the voice shrieked. The taser clattered to the floor. Faith dropped to one knee, panting and trembling, before lifting her gaze. A figure coated in white foam stumbled blindly. "Gotcha now," Faith hissed. She launched herself forward, twisting into a spinning kick that caught the assailant square in the chest. The invisible woman flew backward, hit the wall with a heavy crack, and collapsed in a heap. Silence fell except for Faith's ragged breathing and the wail of alarms. Fraser ran to Faith's side just as security officers flooded in, followed by General Hammond and Tilk. "She's invisible!" Fraser shouted, pointing to the foam-covered figure on the floor. The guards exchanged a quick, uncertain look before turning toward the unconscious woman. Up close, it was clear. Wherever the foam hadn't touched, the figure was transparent. Hammond's eyes hardened. "Get a gurney in here." Moments later, a medical team wheeled one in. The unconscious attacker, Marcie, was lifted onto it. "Take her to Isolation Room 3, Hammond ordered. 24-hour guard, effective immediately." "Understood, sir." As the gurney disappeared down the corridor, Fraser turned back to Faith, who was leaning heavily against the bed's railing. The doctor lowered it, helped her lie back down. "You hurt anywhere?" Fraser asked, quickly scanning her visually for injuries. Faith winced, rolling softly. Her muscles ached from the effects of the intense electrical shock, but she forced her eyes open long enough to see Hammond and Tilk standing near the doorway, watching silently. Then her vision blurred. Exhaustion swept through her, and Faith closed her eyes, breathing shallowly as the alarms continued to echo through the halls. LAX, 15:45 hours. Upon exiting the plane after it landed in Los Angeles, Carter headed to another terminal where she could purchase a ticket to Colorado Springs. During the entire flight to LA, she had been racking her brain, trying to recall the name of the doctor who had delivered Ellie, as well as the nurse who had been there with her and Betty. "Come on," thought Carter as she hurried toward the next terminal. "His name is right at the back of my mind. Reed something. Reed Richards? No, that's a comic book character. Mental note, never mention that name in front of Colonel O'Neill. I'll never hear the end of it." The major continued to think about the name until she suddenly stopped, reached into her bag, and took out her phone to make a note. Peyton Reed, she thought as she typed the name into her phone, so she wouldn't forget it. Peyton Reed, that's it. That's the man who delivered Ellie. And the nurse... Carter frowned, slipping her cell phone back into her bag as she continued walking toward the next terminal, still trying to recall the nurse's name. She ran through names in her mind as she entered the terminal and headed straight to the ticket counter. There, she told the attendant she needed a ticket to Colorado Springs on the earliest possible flight. "Sorry, ma'am," said the woman behind the counter as she checked the computer. "The earliest flight to Colorado Springs leaves in 3 hours. "Nothing earlier?" asked Carter, wanting to reach the SGC as soon as humanly possible. "Sorry," the woman replied with a shake of her head. Carter sighed quietly. She had no choice. She booked the flight, handed over her credit card. A few minutes later, after the attendant printed her ticket, Carter thanked her and headed toward the gate area to wait. She decided to call the SGC while she had the time. "NORAD," came the familiar voice of Walter Harriman on the other end. "Walter," Carter said, "I need to talk to Colonel O'Neill." "Ma'am," the technician began, recalling everything that had happened over the past few hours. The Tolan had come through the Stargate to retrieve their stolen technology. After they departed, following both General Hammond and Daniel, trying to smooth things over with the Tolan delegation, the general had called Colonel O'Neill, who was accompanied by Tilk, into his office. Walter wasn't sure what had been discussed, but he did know that General Hammond had offered Colonel O'Neill retirement, and he had taken it. The news had shocked everyone. The leader of SG-1, the SGC's premier team, had left the Air Force. The shock had spread throughout the base within an hour of his departure, and Walter couldn't imagine how the rest of SG-1 would take it, especially Major Carter. He also knew that the general wanted to tell her personally, which was probably for the best. Walter had also heard what had happened with Faith, and the circulating rumor that the young woman was Carter's daughter. He knew the Major would be upset about Faith being targeted inside the SGC, Though the truth was, they still knew nothing about the mysterious invisible girl. She remained unconscious, leaving them with no answers. For now, Walter stuck to his duties. Colonel O'Neill's busy, ma'am. I'll transfer you to General Hammond. Sure, said the Major as she sat down in one of the seats near the gate area. Busy doing what? Oh, maybe he's still writing his report on the Tolan meeting. Hopefully they managed to secure at least limited access to their technology. Their ion cannons are amazing, but even some of their smaller advancements would be fantastic. A few seconds later, there was a click, and General Hammond's voice came through. General, sir, said Carter, speaking into her phone. I've spoken to Ellie's friends and found some interesting information. I'll brief you when I get back, but my flight from LA doesn't leave for another 3 hours, give or take. Major, said the general. The blonde officer immediately noticed a strange edge in his tone. She wanted to ask if everything was alright with Faith back at the SGC, but before she could, Hammond continued. I'm looking forward to comparing notes when you return. Seated behind his desk, Hammond pressed the receiver to his ear. He hated hiding information from his officers, especially when it involved their families. But he needed Carter calm and focused. It was best that she be notified in person, particularly since they had already caught the young woman who attacked the Slayer. Still, Hammond knew he needed to tell Carter about Colonel O'Neill's situation. Outside groups, especially the Gang of Traitors, were already investigating him, and both Hammond and O'Neill agreed that their reactions, especially Carter's, had to appear genuine if the cover story was to hold. Hammond sighed softly before saying, Major, in the case of Colonel O'Neill, well, something has happened. Sir? Asked a worried Carter, searching for a quieter corner of the terminal's gate area. What's wrong? Did the mission go? The Colonel stole technology from the Tolan, Major, said the General. Carter froze mid-stride, stunned. As you can guess, this was unacceptable behavior, and so the Colonel can't be with us anymore, Carter finished, shaking her head in disbelief. But sir, it doesn't make sense. He knows how important our work is. Why would he? As of right now, Major, Hammond said firmly, Colonel O'Neill is no longer involved with anything related to the Stargate program. His clearance has been revoked and he has admitted what he did. I'm sorry, Major. Carter stammered, shaking her head again, fighting back tears at the thought of no longer working with O'Neill. She thought of how he'd mumble when she slipped into technobabble mode, or how he'd joke when Daniel excitedly lectured about off-world ruins. I'll be there as soon as I can, sir. Samantha, said Hammond gently, a new leader will be selected for SG-1. I want you to understand that I realize it won't be me, Carter whispered, understanding that the Major wasn't the rank the higher-ups wanted for the leader of SG-1. Will it be Colonel Reynolds, sir? I still haven't made a decision yet, Hammond replied. I see, Carter said quickly, continuing down the brightly lit corridor toward another gate area. She wiped the tears welling in her eyes and decided to change the subject. She told Hammond that she remembered the doctor who had delivered Faith was someone named Peyton Reed, and although she still couldn't recall the nurse's name, they could probably find it by calling the hospital. Then she suddenly stopped as a flash of memory hit her. Sir, she said with renewed confidence, I remember the name of the nurse. It's Maggie Williams. All right, said the General as he wrote down both names on a piece of paper in his office. I'll have Walter start making some discreet inquiries about these two. He folded the paper and stood up from his chair. I'll be looking forward to your report when you return. Hammond then placed the receiver back on its cradle and walked out of his office. At the same time, Carter returned to her gate and sat down. All she could do now was wait for her flight. To be continued.